Negotiating authenticity and identity within the cultural jungle. The visual language of Lawrence Tan, a performance piece featuring Professor Louis Kavouras, Chair, Department of Dance, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and myself, Robert Tracy, Department of Art, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. If it had been possible to build the Tower of Babel without climbing it, would have been permitted, so says Franz Kafka. Tower, a building or structure, high in proportion. Its oblique dimensions isolate this form from its community. Such tall structures have been used in the past and present as a stronghold, as a fortress, as a prison. Tower, a citadel, a column or pillar, a spire that ambitiously strives for height, a steeple, a bastion. Genesis, the Old Testament, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. God's people baked bricks. They took up making mortar, and they exclaimed, "Let us build ourselves a city. Let us build it as a tower, with its top in the heavens, a beautiful tower rising above the clouds from the alluring plain of Shinar." Our bewitching tower, the world's first skyscraper, will ascend from the vibrant city of Babylon. This tower will grace the open squares and the broad boulevards of Babylon. Our site for the tower is perfect, swelling from the center of Babylon, from the very heart of a great metropolis. We will be able to climb up the stairs and communicate with our God. As we build, we will be focused, and our gaze will be fixated on the prize being free to speak with our God, to be unmasked and untethered before our God. The people of Babylonia designed this tower with spiraling staircases, offering views from spacious terraces, glimpses of the watch of him that sleeps as their journey to heaven progresses upward. As the great tower rose, those making the bricks and mortar grew anxious to reach heaven, to reach the gates to God, and speak with their deity, as they were all of one language then. As the ziggurat grew vertically above the plain of Shinar, those making the bricks and mortar recognized they had an unexpected difficulty. Their construction process had stalled. The workers were confused. The workers were confounded. To ascend to the gates of God, these workers and builders had to overcome numerous obstacles. They had to make sure their design was strong and not vulnerable. But their spiritual faith had been compromised. These brick and mortar workers had been so focused on reaching the threshold of God, they forgot to reckon with the fact that the gateway to God necessitated they opened the entranceway to heaven. These brick and mortar workers were not concerned with what was acceptable to their God. These people were acting on what they deemed right and correct decision making along the paths they were making. The gateway to God required ascending to the presence of the gold, wrought iron gates, protected by St. Peter, the keeper of the keys to the kingdom of God. But these Babylonian laborers were chastened and punished by God. God was indignant at their temerity, so he confused their language, their ability to communicate with one another. They were now disordered, they were disarranged, and they were in disarray. These brick and mortar workers sought collectively to do good, to follow a just pathway along which they could travel in openness. But now, with God's verdict, these brick and mortar workers were isolated. God was displeased by their insolent pride. Nimrod the first on earth to be a mighty man, had failed his God. God wanted his people to spread across the earth, united as one. But Nimrod wanted to build a marvelous city instead, with a tower to climb, the stairways to heaven. Nimrod's people were once monolingual. They were unified and focused on their respective tasks. But it was God's will to scatter and disperse them. Nimrod and his people did not prevail in their insolence. Nimrod and his people left the plains of Shinar to explore the earth, leaving the tower abandoned. Nimrod and the Babylonian laborers failed to realize the gates of heaven open on the side that St. Peter was on, not from the side that they were on. Peter Bruegel, the elder, depicted the Tower of Babel in a 1563 oil-on-wood painting. The tower is large. It dominates the plain of Shinar, but the structure is forever unfinished and incomplete. Bruegel places Nimrod, the famous hunter, warrior, and conqueror of Babylonia, as an allegorical manager of the construction process. Yet all around Nimrod, we see confusion and contradiction. We see discord, we see disharmony, and yes, we see disarray. Bruegel's Nimrod appears frustrated, as he was wanted to waste no time. It was the moment that counted. In pushing his workers forward and upward, Bruegel's Nimrod was so focused on the end project that he refused to accept any delay. There were to be no obstacles to thwart upward progress. The Tower of Babel rose to an estimated height of about 270 feet. The Babylonian workers now spoke different languages. God prevented them from communicating with one another. God brought this sinful construction to a halt. Biblical stories and mythologies, ecclesiastical narratives continue to receive interest and scrutiny in popular culture today. Among both visual artists and writers, lessons on morality transcend time and experiences. Abel Grimmer, the Flemish late Renaissance painter, took up the Tower of Babel narrative, but Grimmer pushed a biblical chronicle toward the naturalism of Flemish landscape painting, emphasizing nature over architectural rendering. Grimmer viewed the Tower of Babel narrative within his vision of the world about him. Grimmer chose not to portray the world around him. Instead, Grimmer decided it was in his best interest to invent the world as he perceived it, through the lens of the Flemish Renaissance. Grimmer's Tower of Babel was installed recently in the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. The famed biblical narrative by Grimmer helped create the aura of the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, as an international icon, but more so as a beacon for the region. Like Bruegel, the elder before him, Grimmer's work is stylistically similar to Bruegel in its spiral composition, emphasis on miniature precision, architectural references to the Colosseum, and the allusion to the decay of Imperial Rome. The Louvre Abu Dhabi also featured Ai Weiwei's Fountain of Light, at the same time as Grimmer's Tower of Babel. It was installed in a new Art and Civilization Museum on the grounds of the Arabian Peninsula. Ai Weiwei's Fountain of Light, it is part of the Abu Dhabi Permanent Collection. Grimmer's work is oil on wood, while Weiwei's is a twisted steel covered with 32,400 glass crystals. Weiwei's Fountain of Light is more chandelier than wall object. Soviet painter, architect, inspired Weiwei. Vladimir Tatlin and his famed monument to the Third International. Tatlin was responding to World War I and the Russian Revolution. Tatlin's conception was fashioned by the horrors of trench warfare and the new technology of warfare that changed the face of conflict. Ai Weiwei's conception of his fountain of light suggests the inevitability of change within the modern constructivist utopia, as well as the discrepancy in contemporary Chinese values. For Weiwei, the steel-based structure speaks to the Communist Party, while the reflecting crystals allude to the elite, opulent taste. Scatter and disperse as ignorance is no longer bliss. Journey to settle throughout the world, spread the word, the gospel narrative, wherever the journey leads one to go. That charge was made exponentially more difficult because language became confounded and the world was not in accord. Today we live in a world of ongoing globalization. Technology and business interests reach out across the globe. The biblical language barrier may now finally be mitigated. Programs, software, artificial intelligence, and machines have heightened the dispersing of knowledge and information, which ultimately appear to reverse the curse of Babylon. We turn our gaze now to Lawrence Tan. Tan was born in The Hague, Holland. He is of Dutch, Chinese, Australian, American cultural heritage. Tan has studios in Beijing, Sydney, and Las Vegas. Tan is the poster child, the poster artist who embraces global reach. Tan uses his art forms to energize language within the global world. As Tan vacillates between his Chinese, Australian, and American studios, this contemporary postmodern artist has felt like an outsider. Being foreign, that is, the interloper, is a curious anachronism, especially in the context of the Tower of Babel narrative. With the commingling of languages, Tan learned Dutch, then Mandarin, and then English. A recent theme that Tan has embraced is how language, long a barrier confounding communication and business, may negotiate and transform the business side of culture. Words and images burst within the dust pores of our ethereal isolation on the global stages of China, Australia, and the United States. As our watchful eyes turn towards Tan, our eyes are intrigued by the impression of seeing Tan's Babylologic series, a series based on and inspired by Bruegel's Tower of Babel. Or is it? Tan's Babylologic is a postmodern examination of the biblical narrative offered previously by Bruegel, Grimmer, and Weiwei. Branching out from Weiwei's Fountain of Light, Tan explores recurring themes of the Tower of Babel, as perceived within the many layers of globalization, urbanization, and business. Instead of constructing a tower with bricks and mortar made by Babylonian workers, Tan chooses to use recurring Chinese vehicles, sanlongs, three-wheeled bicycles actually. These bicycles continue to populate Chinese cities as Tan downplays the architectural reference to the tower. Unlike Bruegel and Grimmer before him, Tan uses multimedia to express his thoughts on language and art as a vehicle for thinking. By using video, sculpture, graphics, and flashing digitized Chinese characters, Tan reminds us how thoroughly the language barrier is slowly disappearing, and the need for artists to sustain the biblical narrative today in today's culture. The speed of flashing, pulsating, and throbbing images of Chinese characters projected on the wall reverberate off the wall screens and challenge our attention to stay focused on the animated digital images and graphic design text and Chinese characters amidst the colorful sculpture of sanlongs proved to be very mesmeric, even with the lack of a fixed point of view. Just as an angry God confounded the languages of his people, as he sent them out to journey and spread his word, Tan confronts a challenging Chinese language. Both the grammar rules and writing system are complicated. In the Babbalogic series of multimedia work, Tan juxtaposes sculptured objects with Chinese character embedded into the form of a three-wheeled bicycle in order to not only communicate across cultures, but to also reconnect through the nuances of linguistics. Tan very effectively projects images on the gallery walls. Tan centers his Babbalogic Chinese three-wheeled bicycle in the center of the exhibition space to bequeath real and lasting value. As members of the audience, we must choose whether to focus on the video, the graphic images, or the pulsating energy, all the while confronting the immaculate sculpture, all polished and colorful. Very tactile piece of work of art. As Tan studied ceramics, painting, and sculpture, the artist recognized he was looking for something innate about form, balance, symmetry, something that I could read as being innate. Tan found that something innate with the three-wheeled bicycle, the tricycle-like structures of Chinese forms of transportation. Tan realized he was attracted to the elemental sense of stability in the structural design, an intuitive sense that Tan refers to as the ultimate relaxation or the depth of ease. Also, as Tan's inherent response to the flight of Chinese cities. Dr. Felicia Florine Campbell, a professor of English at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, recognized that Tan had tapped into the innate for both the Chinese three-wheeled bicycle and the artist's inevitable erosion of cultural identity. Meant Tan refused to be pressured to be Chinese. Tan's Babbalogic series is a process the artist uses to decipher how I think, how I work, shaking the trees to see what falls out. I always tend to work in series to help me see the limits of an idea. Whether they be in China or Australia, there is a link. As an artist active in 3 studios in China, Australia, and the United States, Tan now sees the Babbalogic series as a culmination of that series of works, commissioned during several residencies in East Asia, Oceania, and North America. Tan prefers to blur the distinctions or boundaries between sculpture, product design, music, architecture, and graphics as he moves effortlessly from drawing, charcoal, tactile analog work to design and digital work. A residency in Paris pushed Tan to purchase a video camera with which he documented versions of the Statue of Liberty. Tan took the video very instinctively. He discovered various effects which energized him towards this new medium for expression and for staging installations. The ideas came so quickly, and you could invent so many things, including product, industrial design. Video imagery combined with the installations and CGI effects reflect Tan's growing curiosity with architectural spaces as an appropriate methodology for inventing space, and narrating his intellectual activity about popular culture, where Tan is able to link technological advances consistently, while the artist's skill level with 3D modeling enhances the structural architecture. Tan relishes in the belief that artistic expression exists everywhere now with global communication and technological growth and inventiveness, paving the way for artists such as himself to explore and engage in the fluidity of experimentation in an environment of overlapping disciplines. If you want an elephant to walk on your back, you do not need an elephant anymore. Contemporary culture is replete with opportunities. Fantasy is within reach to a point never conceived of before. And this fantasy is more believable to the audience. Tan still enjoys drawing and especially linking music to his work. Tan likens music to an analog image. How you strike the strings has consequences. It is like a paintbrush. Tan has used his innate fascination with music and the consequences of striking the strings and soundtracks for his video work. It will take a while before what I create can surpass what I can find, but the difference is that it's custom made, so says the artist. The world is limitless to the artist today. It is a privilege to be active today as an artist in such an environment replete with exploration and enjoying the abundance of the creative experience. Music contributes a sense of performance to his installations, and the ability to improvise provides future possibilities. How is Babalogic connected to Las Vegas? For Tan, Vegas is an additional stimulus for the Babalogic series. Compared to studios in Beijing and Sydney, Vegas is calming, like a hideout. I'm in solitude there, he says. Vegas is more like a void. It's like the opposite of Beijing. It's a love-hate thing, I guess. In Beijing, it's quite clear I get frustrated with the non-logical manner of how things work and don't work. And the chaos, the love part is also quite clear. The Chinese language has such depth, and I don't think I could ever find that anywhere else. I've got a bit of a handle on that now, extracting possibilities. For Tan and his aesthetic sensibilities and proclivities, Beijing, Sydney, and Las Vegas are open-minded and open-ended, enough to keep him in studios. Those cities as seen to exist with the prevailing cultural crucibles this artist values most of all, where contemporary art operates as a vehicle for thinking. Tan travels from East Asia to Oceania to North America to make contact with a vital punch, continually looking for thrills. Tan plans to continue using Chinese characters in his text, in his sculptural forms, and in his installations. All mediums are utilized by this artist today. Tan continues to cast his eyes about. The artist spent time in Istanbul, Turkey. The cultural and creative atmosphere was experimental and exciting, like Beijing the first time. The Turkish language was a challenge, but Tan found himself drawn to the Ottoman script. Wherever Tan goes as an artist and as a tourist, he recognizes language as less a boundary as confounded in the biblical Tower of Babel narration of Bruegel, Tatlin, Grissom, and Weiwei. But Tan does not feel pressured or driven to identify himself as Chinese. Tan understands we live in a different age, an age demonized by injustices, and hatred. Within such an environment, Tan pursues images and visual experiences that enable free agency without the necessity of compensation. Tan seeks goodness and justice unabashedly. Tan refuses the outside pressure to be recognized as a Chinese artist, first and foremost. Tan's attitude to that sense of identity and selfhood is driven by experience, not by the schooled people, not just by artists, but by the generally ordinary people of the street, as they can read my work in a Chinese way, he states. For Lawrence Tan, the slipping of the isolation resulting from God's punishment of confounding languages empowers and enables the artist and the audience to know themselves and to know one another. By believing so passionately, Tan and the audience create together. If it had been possible to build the Tower of Babel without climbing it, it would have been permitted, so says Franz Kafka. Thank you.